Rosenberg published an article called The Decline of North American Avifauna, and it synthesized a bunch of data from all over the continent since 1970, and it showed that there have been drastic population declines across birds, and totaling about 2.9 billion since 1970. So between 1970 and when that paper was published in 2019, that equals about 3 billion birds, or about 29% of the total bird populations in North America. And it's not even across all groups, so it varies between species, and some species that have been hit a lot harder. But surprisingly, some of the birds that were commonly, or previously thought to be common, are suddenly not so common anymore. For instance, common grackles have gone down quite a bit. There's quite a few folks in the room that participated in chimney swift surveys in the last year or two. Those were formerly very common and are declining. Eastern meadowlarks are another one that were very common, and we're just not seeing as many anymore. And a lot of the info in this part of the presentation is available on this 3billionbirds.org website, and a lot of these graphics come from there too. It's a good source of information. But there's several groups in particular that have been hit really hard. Migratory birds are particularly sensitive, of course, because they rely on habitat availability both here in their nesting grounds and then down in the tropics. So there's multiple areas where habitat loss can hit them. So they have experienced the largest declines of any group, about 2.5 billion birds lost since 1970. And then also grassland birds hit very hard because of habitat loss. And then aerial insectivores, probably likely because of the drastic insect declines that we're also seeing. So all these things are tied together. And then dividing the birds into sort of different ways of categorizing them. The birds of eastern forests, we've lost about 170 million. And then the boreal forests, 500 million. So these are really staggering numbers. And there's many different things working in synchronicity together to cause these declines, but the number one cause of declines is habitat degradation. So developing land for agriculture and urban developments, suburban developments, and really that results in fragmentation. So the loss of larger tracts of land has been a big problem. And then right behind habitat loss is actually window strikes. That we are losing about 1 billion birds per year. That's what's estimated in the United States due to birds running into windows. And Ben's going to talk a lot about solutions for that later. And then right behind window strikes, and in fact it seems like the data kind of flip-flops back and forth between which one of these is more problematic, but free-ranging cats take out about 500 million birds per year in the US. The good news is not all taxa have been in decline. Ducks and waterfowl have gone up by about 35 million since 1970, and that's a lot because of the conservation efforts of Ducks Unlimited and other kind of more hunting-based groups. Raptors have increased by 15 million, and that's mostly due to the banning of DDT, which was causing their eggs to break. Up until that book, Silent Spring, really brought that to light. And then woodpeckers are, surprisingly, woodpeckers are actually on the increase because of the extensive forest management that has been going on. We've really started to do our forest harvesting differently in a way that protects some of the larger trees and allows for some of those big, large trees that might have cavities in them or leave some standing snags in the forest that they're able to nest in. And then in the southeast, there's been some big concerted efforts to preserve pine savanna forests, which is particularly important for red-cockaded woodpeckers. So that's the problem, and it's a pretty big, pretty scary problem, but there are solutions and there are things that we can do to help. And here in our area, we have an effort going on, an interagency effort that I'll talk about. But first I want to explain what important bird areas are. So the organization BirdLife International has designated 13,000 areas across the world that are deemed to be important bird areas. So they're places that are management priorities. And within the United States, there's over 2,000 important bird areas, or IBAs. So these areas provide essential habitat. They can be public or private lands, but they're voluntary. It's not something that's there's a legal status or anything being imposed upon the landowner if they happen to be in an IBA. In order to qualify as an important bird area, it needs to meet one of these requirements. So they can support birds that are threatened or endangered, support birds that are vulnerable because they are not widely distributed, so if they have a very small geographic range, if they require special habitats, or an area where birds congregate for feeding, breeding, or migration. So for instance, a place that is really important stopover habitat might qualify. So here, within the state of Wisconsin, we actually have 93 important bird areas, and the green patches on the map show those. And the one that's near us here is the Kickapoo Wildcat IBA. So I've got Ben actually color-coded these for us. The green here this is Wildcat Mountain State Park. Then the red down here is Tunnelville Cliffs, and right kind of in the middle is Kickapoo Valley Reserve. So those three public properties all combine to form a large block of contiguous habitat, totaling about 54,000 acres. And it's not all public lands that comprise the IBA. There's also 14,000 acres of private land in there too. So here it is on the larger zoomed out map of our area. So you can see that it spans Vernon and Monroe counties here and is quite a large area. The land cover within the Kickapoo Wildcat important bird area is mostly forest, and but there are some areas within there that are grasslands. It's about 63% forest, 20% grasslands, and then there's some agriculture in there, about 11%, and 4% of it is wetlands. Within the important bird area, there's been documented 209 species, and 13 of those are considered rare bird species. So we live in actually a really special area as far as bird habitat. If you think about birds that are flying from Central and South America on their way migrating up to breed for the summer, when they come north, they're in the Ozarks, which is a large patch of forested habitat, and the green represents forest. And then they kind of hit this area of very little forest availability as they're coming through Illinois and Iowa, and so it's quite a long stretch for them to make it. And the very first thing they hit as they're coming north is here in southwestern Wisconsin. So this is the largest tract, southwest Wisconsin, of forested habitat available between the Ozarks and the boreal forest up in Canada. So really an important area for conservation, not only just for neotropical migrants, but for resident birds that stay year-round as well, but really critical for those migrating birds to be able to stop here. And so that was the impetus for forming the interagency group, the Kickapoo Bird Habitat Initiative. And that is coordinated by Valley Stewardship Network now. I think the Mississippi Valley Conservancy originally were kind of taking the lead on that. So they're still a very active part of it. The Ho-Chunk Nation is part of that group, the Wisconsin DNR, and the Kickapoo Valley Reserve. And then Wildcat Mountain State Park is run by DNR as well, and their managers are involved in that group as well. So the goal of this group is to protect, enhance, and connect bird habitat in and near the Kickapoo Wildcat IBA. So just really focusing on that IBA. And there's two main categories that we work in. One is working with landowners. I mentioned that quite a bit of that IBA, about 14,000 acres, is actually private land. So performing landowner consultations where we offer our services to go out to people's properties and tell people what we're seeing there. Here's the birds that we're seeing, here's what we're seeing as far as vegetation and habitat, and then here's some management recommendations we can provide if you want to enhance your habitat for birds. So that's a free service that we offer to any landowners living in and around the IBA. And then on the public lands in the IBA, we're helping coordinate the management plans between those 3 public properties and well, really, and the Ho-Chunk Nation too. So it's really 4 groups that we're trying to make sure everyone's talking to each other about aligning management recommendations for birds. And so we're conducting bird surveys in those areas to feed into their management plans and provide information about where key areas for management exist and important places to preserve. And then moving forward, making sure that future management plans continue to have birds as a high priority. The mission statement of the Kickapoo Bird Habitat Initiative, or as we call it, the KBHI, is a public and private partnership to increase awareness, improve habitat, and engage landowners in conservation practices for birds and other wildlife within the Kickapoo Wildcat Important Bird Area. And our vision is a healthy landscape of diverse native habitats and farmlands that supports sustainable populations of birds and provides an enriched quality of life for all who live, work, and play here. So in order to effectively try to manage birds in this project, we have to focus on which species we want to manage for, because every species has its own very unique set of habitat requirements that it needs. But by focusing on ones that are either rare or threatened, or focusing on species that we consider representative species for this landscape, we're hoping that we are encompassing many of the habitat needs of all the other species. So the ones that we've identified that are particularly in need of management in our area are cerulean warblers, Kentucky warblers, hooded warblers, Acadian flycatchers, and Louisiana water thrushes. And then we have a number of others that we chose either because they're very representative, they're ones that you tend to see here or that are really indicative of this particular habitat type, or because they're extremely charismatic. Like everyone loves scarlet tanagers, red-headed woodpeckers, and so it's easy to get people excited about managing for those and getting those, keeping them on your land or getting them back on your land if they're not still there. So we were really fortunate this last year to receive a grant from the Wisconsin Bird Conservation Partnership, an important bird area grant. And so they funded our work for this year. And the purpose of that was to promote conservation actions within IBAs and to form local partnerships, private lands outreach, and bird surveys. So those are kind of the 3 categories that we're working under in this grant. One of the things we're doing as a grant activity is Ben Johnston, who is our mapper for Valley Stewardship Network, was doing some mapping of the important bird area. So he was looking at habitat continuity and identifying where the largest blocks of continuous forests are within the IBA. So the colored areas here each represent a continuous block. So this is where, within the IBA, the management recommendations would be to try and preserve that continuity, and then it kind of highlights areas where there's a need to increase the connectivity of that habitat by restoring forest where there's gaps. And all of this data can be reported to the managers of these public lands so it can feed into their management plans. Another big part of this grant, as I mentioned, is landowner consultations. So as part of that, we send our staff members, here we are out at our board member, Tom Fossbender's property, and we walk the property, we see what birds are there, we provide a map of the property, and then once we're done, we give them a report of what we observed, what type of habitat we saw, any concerns like invasive species, whether there's, if there's feral cats there or cats running around, or what management recommendations we might be able to suggest for them. So we try and keep it to a doable list of several key habitat recommendations, often things like planting natives or getting a nice smooth edge between forest and open areas rather than a stark edge. And then another thing we're doing under this grant is conducting bird surveys on those public lands to identify where our focal species exist, and then the areas that would be most key for managing that and preserving that habitat. So the species that we focused our, well, this year we went to Wildcat Mountain State Park, and we focused on Louisiana water thrush, Acadian flycatcher, winter wren, Kentucky warbler, and cerulean warbler. And we documented all the birds that we observed, but these are the ones that we were particularly, sorry, I saw you were taking a picture. These are the ones that we were particularly looking for. And then in the coming year, we will be doing similar surveys at Kickapoo Valley Reserve. So the results of our surveys this year, we created 26 checklists at 7 different locations. Louisiana water thrush was a particular focus bird that we were trying to find because they have very specific habitat requirements for intact small streams with forest around them. We did find 2 Louisiana water thrush, one at the Ice Cave Trail and one at Billings Creek. And we also found several Acadian flycatchers, and a total of 64 species on our point counts. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to Ben. I have a little intro for him to tell you about him. And Ben's going to talk about more specifically what individuals can do to help bird populations. This is Ben Johnston. He's our GIS and Habitat Specialist for Valley Stewardship Network. Ben lived in Cincinnati, Ohio for 28 years. During these formative years, he studied rocks at the University of Cincinnati. Then he headed off to the University of Maine to learn more about rocks. In 2002, Ben moved to the upper reaches of the Kickapoo Valley. He did not mean to stay this long, 20 years, but now has no desire to ever leave. His first job in Wisconsin was at Gina's Pies Are Square, a cafe formerly in Wilton. Such a good cafe. He worked at the Kickapoo Valley Reserve for 18 years or so, completing various miscellaneous tasks when assigned, but primarily he considered himself a large-scale gardener, eradicating weeds and promoting favorable plants, all with hopes and ambitions to improve habitat. Somewhere time along the way, Ben completed a GIS degree at St. Mary's University in Minnesota. Ben, do you want to talk through the mic? You can put it on your lapel.
Oh.
It's in your pocket.
I always wanted get the microphone here like Janet Jackson would wear, so then I can be more of a rock star. But, I don't know if this one works. Okay. Thank you.
This is your pointer.
That's my pointer, and then this advances the slides. So out of the Rosenberg study came out, at least I assume this is where it came from. It's on the 3billionbirds.org website. These 7 simple actions to help birds. And so that's what I'm going to tell you about. I did not make these up. This is what other people have said, and a lot of the information. So I thought initially, like when I was going to do a talk on the 7 actions, I could just say here they are and then be done. But so you start diving, researching these topics, and you find a whole bunch more information, and that's what I'm going to share with you. These are various agencies that are all behind this list and such. Yeah, so just real quick, don't yell at me. I'm going to talk about very big numbers and things like that. Again, I did not make up this list. I did not. I don't mean to offend people, etc. This is where you don't get to heckle me and throw things at me until later. Anything else? Oh yes, this thing at the bottom. One time I was giving this part of the talk somewhere, and somebody complained that it was very depressing. That's not my fault. I just do. Yeah. So okay, is that all right? We're good. Okay. So one of the yes, these are not in a particular order. It's just the order I put them in. But pesticide use, we all know pesticides can be a problem. Does everybody know about the avicides? There are apparently things you can put out to kill birds. If you consider birds a problem. I assume that goes more with pigeons, but whichever. So rodenticides, insecticides, herbicides, etc., all collectively known as pesticides. And the way these hurt birds or affect birds are various. Rodenticides, you can poison your rodents or other things, and then birds such as raptors will eat those and then ingest the chemicals. And then the herbicides, of course, birds will feed off those, and then the insecticides kill the food for the birds, etc., etc. And so I don't know this nice person, and I don't mean to pick on this nice person, but this is, to me, a great example of poor use of pesticides. I don't know, again, nice person, I don't mean to offend him. What is the goal? I mean, what is he trying to do? Is he trying to kill an insect, kill the plant? There are better ways of going about it than that. And then I like to think, this bush here, but you got all these bushes here. Is he going to go after all those? Causes problems. The other thing again, to pick on my friend is, notice how he's got this Tyvek suit and the gloves, but he has nothing on his face. I mean, if this stuff he's spraying is that toxic, don't you? Anyways, okay. All right. Did I lose my microphone?
I think you're good. I just turned you down.
Okay. All right. So here's just some tips and suggestions on minimizing herbicides. So again, like my friend in the last picture, what is he getting? A lot of times it's just you kill everything to get the one pest. Use it reluctantly. I once watched the nice person at the church parking lot spraying weeds in the cracks, and the sprayer was just going. I mean, it was just constant, and the plants were just soaked with this stuff. And you think, is that really necessary? Phenology, you might want to, if you are using those. Sorry, this is all pretty much herbicides. That's what I do. This is really my justification for using herbicides on invasive plants. But you can hit things at different times to minimize impacts of other things. Knowing what you're going after. And of course, there's always non-chemical approaches. This nice person, I want to know what this person's trying to control, because they're just dumping. And okay, sorry. Okay, I'll just tell you anyways. This one fellow was telling me about how he was spraying garlic mustard in like July, and that's where like phenology and education, because garlic mustard was already dead. So he basically wastes. Anyhow, enough of that. Neonics are something I think some of us have heard about. I am not an expert on them, but these apparently are causing significant problems with insect populations, which then in turn are affecting birds, as well, not just reducing insects, but apparently the birds are intaking the neonics, which then are causing problems with them. I am not an expert on this. I need to learn more. But this was something I read that I thought was very interesting, that the value of the neonics is questionable, at least the one article. Of course, if you're selling neonic chemicals, you're probably going to say, this is where you're not supposed to argue with me. But this one paper said that they might not really be doing much for the crops, but instead they're killing all these other insects and such. Yeah, I don't want to delve in this too much because it's a little bit beyond my comfort zone. The second, the 7 steps is reducing plastics. I think we all know about the plastic problem out there. I remember as a kid, you would take those plastic rings that held 6-packs together, cans, because you would think turtles or things would get caught in them. But it's still going on. Yeah. It's amazing how much of the plastics are not being recycled. Has anybody noticed, so it used to have on the recyclables, there was the little triangle and then a number inside, and it had some letters and it would tell you what it was. Have you noticed that those aren't being used anymore? I just noticed this recently. I'm kind of new at this, but a lot of them are using a different system that tells you what to do. Like it says rinse and recycle or something like that, or it's not recyclable. So there's a different system. It's amazing that people are. Anyhow, so this is something worth noting. We've heard about the microplastics, and a lot of times with the birds, as the plastics break down, they become food particles, we'll see. And that's where a lot of the problems are. You know, a plastic bottle in the river is not as deadly as the fragments as that plastic bottle breaks down. Cool. So yeah, so here's an example of the bird going to eat the little piece of plastic, and there's all kinds of problems that plastics are known to affect reproduction and all kinds of biological things that I can't spell or pronounce. They ingest them, and then of course they can go through their system. They can plug their intestines. They can tear linings and all kinds of things. One thing that's interesting is a lot of birds are finding plastics, and then because they're in the ocean or they have a smell to them, they assess them as food, and then they give them to the young, to feed the young the garbage. I told you this is kind of depressing, but yeah, and then this one study came out of the Journal of Hazardous Materials. Who would have thought a bird topic would be in the hazardous material? I really had this blacked out so you wouldn't see the face. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, Ben.
I didn't mean that. Anyways, so they described a new disease they're calling a wildlife disease called plasticosis, and it was published in this journal. And one thing I thought was terribly interesting when I was looking at that is this is where you would think they would do that study. It was funny because I was looking for a picture like this, and every one I found was somewhere like in a third world country or something like that. I don't know if somebody's censoring the internet, but so this is not our country. But anyways, you would think this is where you would go for such a study, but instead they went to this place, which is off the coast of Australia. And the reason I show this is one, that the researchers weren't stupid, that they would go here. And two, that it's not just, you know, the garbage dump, it's garbage is accumulating in all the nice places too. Okay, the third topic is shade-grown coffee. It is like it sounds. We sell some at the VSN office. And so the concept is pretty simple, is you grow your coffee in a place like this that will enable birds to thrive and thrive. And as a result of not doing this, we're losing a lot of this habitat as they're making large open coffee plantations. So here's an example of, you know, the contrast. This is what your the alternative is to the shade-grown coffee. And then with this, a lot of times too, are all your pesticides, which goes back to the first topic I showed. Yeah, so fun facts. One thing, so I've given this talk a few times, and people have gone to me afterwards and said, I can't find it. Where did you find bird-friendly coffee? Other than the VSN office, most of it's on the internet. I've looked in grocery stores and I can't specifically find it, but it is out there, and we need to get people buying it and selling it. But it gives you some of the points. Nan mentioned the slower growth apparently makes it taste better. I'm not a connoisseur, but that's what they tell me. And I guess there's also bird-friendly cocoa, which is something also that's apparently on its on the trend. And cool. And Yeah, and this is just a nice quote. Most birders don't know about shade-grown coffee. They don't know about the impacts it's doing. But it's really hurting the wintering habitats of most of the migrating birds. I found this math equation somewhere out there, probably on Cornell's website. But so if we can get all 46 million people drinking shade-grown coffee, it'd be a good start. What's that?
Why just the bird watch?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to this, that most bird watchers don't know it exists, and so, but yes, you're right, why only bird watching?
Even in the public school children.
Yeah. Yeah, give the kids coffee. It's okay, kids. And this is just something else that, so, you know, if you can't find the bird-friendly coffee, which is officially designated by the Smithsonian Institute, there are other options that are maybe not as great, but they offer some help and such like that. So these would be other options if you can't find the coffee. And I put this slide in after one of my talks when somebody did want to argue with me. She didn't want to argue. She said, well, that sounds expensive. I'm not going to do that. So this is to give you an idea of how much it costs, a ballpark figure. And you know, it is more expensive, but you can always do other things to offset the cost, like not do your laundry as often, or I don't know, whatever, other things. There's things you can do. I promise. But it's not that you can drink less coffee. So yeah, cool. Right, cats. This is one that I always expect to get something thrown at me, but so cats apparently are a significant problem to birds. I chose this picture versus the other one with the cat with the bird in the mouth because it seems negative. Yeah, and so there are the numbers. I don't know what else I can say about it. I did, I should say that all these numbers, like where I see ranges, you know, these are all various ranges of numbers I come across, so I'd like to share all of them. But 60 million cats eating 500 million birds is, I think it was 8 birds per year, which isn't that much, but when you add up that many birds, cats and birds, it does count. Okay, this was from Cornell's website. This is the graph they have, but you can't read it, so I blew it up. And just giving you some ideas about where some of the bird mortalities come from and how devastating cats can be. And as Beth pointed out, that the windows in cats are kind of a toss-up, I guess. They go back and forth as people probably argue for hours on end. I also like to point out that I think this is funny that it says it over here. Kid you not available. What does that mean? So the cat impact. How do you do things? So you know, we know a nice person that says their cats are good because they eat the mice in the garage or in the barn. You know, and I'm not here to tell you you have to lock up your cats. It'd be great if you did. But there are some things you can do. These so-called these cat collars and the bells, apparently it's questionable whether or not they work. If you're still going to put your cats out, maybe do it anyways. You know, it can't hurt. But I found this Tyrant Farms. I found their blog, which led me to this picture. And first off, the tyrant part is, I assume it's the fella, and the tyrant is his wife. But they talk about this cat, and they put this thing on it. And I found the picture funny because the cat looks so miserable. It's almost like the cone of shame a dog gets when they have a surgery. And then the other thing that was funny was the duck apparently lives in the house. I don't know. could this be a diaper? I've yet to figure that out, but, and apparently in the house, the duck dominates the cat. But when it gets outside, the cat apparently dominates the other birds. And so this is an option, but again, it's questionable whether or not it works. It's best to keep the cats inside. And then again, if you are going to let your cats out, maybe don't feed the birds. Keep them away, or create a safe place for the bird feeder so your cats do not kill the birds. The catios are these things. This is from Oregon. Somebody pointed, it says the Feral Cat Coalition, and somebody's like, there's a coalition of feral cats. I don't think that's really, I think it's more, anyways. But I don't know, I think these are kind of fun. If I was a cat, I'd like to hang out in there, and you got, this walkway here, and there's the cat going across that one, and you can probably put a little hamster wheel in there, and swings, and it's all right. So that's what these patios are. Sometimes they are simple window boxes that people will put outside their window, and the cat can come and go. There's also like screened-in porches and such. Right. This is where I wanted to. This is my dog Freya, and she's a bird killer. And so I just want to say that it's not only the cats out there. Dogs are also a problem, as well as cattle, etc. But they're just not a problem. And I wanted to say this because I don't want the cat people thinking I'm picking on them. But I just want to show off the dog. Okay, the safe windows. As we alluded to, that birds are flying into windows. One of the biggest problems is you have not only a reflective window, but then you have a window beyond that window that conveys a fly-through. And so then a lot of times birds will try to fly through. And so that's always a problem. A friend of mine said, "Oh, that's how I designed my house." He did it on purpose, had all these windows. Yeah, and then lights at night. I was talking to the nice lady in the back of the room earlier. She's not here anymore. But she says her birds were flying into her house at night. And I don't understand the phenomenon of why that happens, but migrating birds are attracted to lights, which the dark sky groups are talking about that as well as a reason for that. And then I just put 100 millions of birds because there's so many different numbers out there. Okay, so did we hear about this? A year ago in October, the wind patterns did things that it pushed the birds into Chicago, and this was apparently, this is where I can't, this is what they tell me. All these birds were killed from one building. That's not 1,000, but that's apparently where they come from. It was not the Field Museum. They're the ones who took the picture. And if you know Chicago, there's a big building downtown that has a lot of windows, and it apparently took out a lot of birds. Yeah, I'm sure the people at the McCormick Center are very nice, but there's a problem with that. It's not just the big buildings, of course. Homes have a problem. And there's a good percentage of bird strikes that are just at homes. And another thing to note is a lot of times you hear the bird hit the window and they fly off, but a lot of times they will die afterwards. So yeah, that's always a problem. So what can you do? We've talked about these window stickers. There's screens on the exterior windows. A lot of homes don't have screens anymore. I have screens. I hate them because I can't see out the window. I can't look at the birds very well because the screen's kind of blurry, but so it goes. Some nice woman said, well, that's not going to help to keeping the windows dirty. And I said, well, it depends on what your definition of dirty is. Because I was thinking like smearing mud on them, or similarly painting windows. When I built my greenhouse, until I could put strings up, I had my helpers, these kids, my cousin's kids, paint the windows with some washed out green paint. Gina did not like that very much, but whatever, that's the way it goes sometimes. Right. Huh? Oh, we also have window tape you can purchase at the gift shop, and you can hang those up at those windows. Here's some examples of the strings. There's a recommendation of 4 inches apart, and then I read somewhere you might want to go smaller for hummingbirds, but you get the idea. A friend said that the problem with, if you don't tie them on at the bottom, every time the wind blows, they kind of rap and tap on the windows, but I say it's better than having a bird hit the window. But it gives you an idea. This is a macrame version of the same thing, be a little artistic. And, right, so native plants, it's one of my favorite topics. So yeah, there's a lot of non-native plants out there. They, so anyways, these non-native plants do not harbor the insects that the birds need to feed their young and to survive on. There's a lot of talk about the native pollinators, and so doing those actions will also in turn help the birds because you're increasing the insect population. Which always seems kind of funny to me that you're like, well, I need to raise these monarchs or need to promote these things so the birds can eat them. That seems kind of counterproductive, but that's the way nature is sometimes. Doug Calamy, if we know him, he's one of his finer quotes. This is, here's my greenhouse with the slightly green windows, you can see them. And I built that, I live in Weldon, and I built that, and then the village wanted to know what it was. Apparently I might have needed a permit, but I don't think it's big enough. Anyhow, I just included my picture of my yard. I'll talk a little more on the next slide, but once upon a time when I first moved there, we would just mow the lawn and just mow it, and that's all we did with it. We didn't do anything, and besides mow it, and sometimes I would cut patterns in it. I would cut circles or zigzags, to break up the monotony of it, but, whatever. And then ever since we started adding the flower beds, not only have we increased the bird population, I mean, come on, it's not like a lot, but, we see different birds, brown thrashers, we never saw them before in the yard. But we also spend more time out in the yard. It's a lot more fun. And so lawn reduction program, I kind of talked about that. We know about the no mow May kind of stuff, and I talked about this, what do you use for recreation or just to mow it. There's a lot of, some people like to mow, and that's fine, please keep doing it, but if you're one of those people who complain that it takes 4 hours to mow your lawn, and you're on a rider, maybe you could start putting in some habitat. There are certification programs you can get. A friend of mine, she lives over near Alaska by the, what do they call that store? Menards. And I was going over there once, and it was funny because I'm going down the street and it's like a suburb, and I'm like, this doesn't seem like where she would live. And there's like lawn care people out doing stuff. I'm like, this is just weird. And I'm going along and I have the number, her house number, and then I see her house because she has all these, just like weeds, growing in her yard. And it was, and I asked her, I said, does anybody complain about it? She says they used to, and then she got a sign, and then they were done complaining. So that's all you need is a sign. Your neighbors won't complain. She also says that people do stop by and smell flowers and look at flowers. So lawn reduction. Just some of the impacts of the non-native and invasive plants. There's disturbing pictures of birds getting in burdock burrs. Seed heads. There's some with bats as well. And then there's plumage discoloration. Can be a problem. Supposedly, so it has to do with the brighter colors for the males makes them look like better mates, but in reality junk food, but not really as healthy, and so that causes biological problems. Here's a short list of some of the native plants you can do. And one thing that in Doug Callamy's book about oaks is it's really important to not only produce, to have plants that produce like berries and such, but you want plants that produce insects for the birds, and oaks are one of the better ones for insects. Some 500, something like that. Caterpillars rely on oaks, which is all valuable food sources. What's that? No? Okay, better. Anyways, so, and then the seventh step is participate in citizen science. Most of that 2019 report was based on citizen science data. One of the authors says so. Here's some birders in action. Nice group of people. These are some of the surveys that they use for that data, or that study. And yeah, and so here are some of the citizen science projects for birds. Christmas bird count is starting soon. There are several circles or survey areas in the region. I know some compilers or coordinators if you want to get involved. I know people. I got connections. There's graveyard bird count, the crane count, etc. And then, you know, the old standby is eBird, and that's the online database where people enter your own personal bird observations. It goes into the database, and then people can, general public can access that information and do statistics and figure out bird trends and things like that. Cool. And so there they are again. Again, there's no particular order. Easy peasy. And so these are some of the important references should you want to learn more about this stuff. And I think that is all I have for you. Beth and I love answering questions.